I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Chris Clark, hairstylist for the show Ratched, which just earned an Emmy nomination for his work. So let's start there, Chris. Tell me about what the day of the nominations announcement was like for you.
It's always such an honor, honestly. I was actually taking a class with IATSE in order to become an educator. And then the text messages just started flying through when I was in the middle of that class. So it's always it's amazing. It's an amazing experience.
Yeah. Well, speaking of getting the call, when you got the call to be in charge of doing the hair for Ratched, where do you go from there as far as, looking for inspiration? Are you looking back on the styles of the 40s and sort of thinking about character motivations? Like, what are those first steps for you?
I've worked for Ryan a few times now, especially in period projects. So I have the luxury of having a shorthand with him. So I know once I get the script, sort of the generalized vibe and the sort of feel he generally likes. So I'm very, very much research driven. So I just started digging into the period. I started digging into all kinds of people. I went from everything from mugshots in the 1940s through glamour advertisements. And then I create files for every character based on my own thoughts. And then we start digging in with Ryan and what he feels for each character one by one.
Well, I was also just curious how much of what we see on the show is just the actor's natural hair versus wigs. Like, what do you do for this time period?
Wigs and wigs and wigs
Mm-hmm.
and wigs. Lots of wigs. It's just so much easier for an actor to show up in the morning and have their hairstyle ready to be put on.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the lengths and the colors from the 40s are very different from what's popular now. So to get those proper haircuts, it's very difficult. And to get, especially with the men's grooming, we wigged quite a few men as well, just to get the right shapes.
Right. Well, this is a show where the hair has such a distinct style to it, but also, we also see a lot of hats, considering, so much of the show is spent at the hospital. Are there challenges there in sort of sculpting the hair to also accommodate those, even, some of the more elaborate hats we also see outside the hospital too?
Definitely. It's always a joy to collaborate with Lou Eyrich, and she knows I love hats, and I love when she puts hats in scenes. It just really places us in the period. And so I'm happy to put a hat on anything, and I will design around the hat if the hairstyle is changing. Or generally in the early 40s, women had a hairstyle and they knew they were going to have a hat on it. So we just made sure that we could accommodate it. And as far as the nurses' hats, we knew that early on what that was going to be like. So we designed to make sure every nurse had a spot for the hat to go that was proper. And then I was able to find early 1943 bobby pins on Etsy. So every bobby pin you see in one of the nurses' hats is actually authentic to the period, which no one would ever know, but it's just like right. Me dorking out and having it be right.
How involved would you say that the actors themselves get with the presentation of their hair? Is there room for on a show like this that's so period specific? Do they have the freedom to have a say in how they present themselves?
Absolutely. It's a collaboration for sure. Mm-hmm. One of the characters, Nurse Bucket, played by Judy Davis, she came in with very, very specific ideas about what she wanted her characters to look like. And they were not my ideas. I was far off from what she actually ended up with. I thought it was going to be a little more stylized, and then she wanted it a little more rough and ready. And she was absolutely right. Sometimes the actor knows a character better than you have. They've done so much development with Ryan and with their own personal study of the script. So a lot of input. There's color inputs for sure, and haircut inputs. Some actors just let me fly. They just know who I am because we have a past relationship and they just trust me. But that's my favorite part, is the character development, sitting down with the actor and figuring out what their vision is and how my research can make that come alive for them.
Yeah, that actually makes sense for Judy's character being more practical and, not wanting the fancy hair and everything like that. But I was also hoping you could speak to just the evolution of what we see with Nurse Ratched herself over the course of the season, as a character, because I feel like, just from my observations, her style really changes from the first episode to the point where we see her then in Mexico in the final episode. What were you hoping to suggest about her over the course of that time?
Sarah Paulson had a personal hairdresser for Ratchet.
Yeah.
Michelle Siglia looked after her, but it was really, if I can speak for Michelle, it was really driven by the script, like the emotional journey and the finding love halfway through this sort of kind of manic story. I think really informed all of the hair choices, and you see it in the costumes and the hats as well. This sort of like opening up and softening of the character, and Michelle just did a phenomenal job with Sarah.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the other prominent characters, of course, is Cynthia Nixon as Gwendolyn, especially with the wavy hair kind of look. There's great swoops in her hair. Can you talk about crafting that look?
That was one I did. I started the conversation with Cynthia early on, just by text message before we'd even met, about the hair color, because I wanted to keep everyone separate as far as their color palettes. And so I knew I wanted Cynthia in a red tone, but I didn't want a red tone we had seen before. So we talked a lot about this sort of strawberry idea for her hair. And then everything about those shapes were based on a period photo that I then altered and changed to enhance her own natural beauty. We changed the shapes a little bit, but it was definitely a trial at the very beginning on camera test day. I moved the waves around. We added a little more volume at the neck because we just, with the high collars, and it was really tailored to her. And I really enjoyed doing that hairstyle.
Yeah. Well, I was also reading from another interview that you weren't on the set for the Sharon Stone scenes, but, you know, she really sort of took charge of how her hair should look. I was curious what that experience was like as far as kind of ceding control over to Sharon and the other hairstylists.
Absolutely. I was there when Sharon was shooting. I was away when Sharon was getting established and getting designed. I was off back home in Austin getting married. So I was away for 2 weeks. And I was getting pictures from my assistant department head. And it was all over the place at the very beginning. It was either going to be black or it was going to be white, and it was going to be this or that. And Sharon really drove that. She has experience as a hairdresser, so she knows exactly how she wants to look and where the waves should sit. And my assistant department head did a phenomenal job, and they developed a great relationship. And it was just stunning. Like, it just worked out so beautifully. And the wig maker did such a lovely job with that color, and just was, I think, a nice success.
Absolutely. Was there another look for you this season that you were able to accomplish that maybe might not be as obvious on first watch, but that you were kind of subtly able to pull off that you're proud of?
Definitely the men's wigs. I think a lot of people did not realize Dr. Hanover was in a full wig. And I think a lot of people, he's in a full wig. The actor himself is buzzed down to nothing. And Vincent D'Onofrio was in a full wig as well. And a lot of people didn't realize that. And so those are my little feather in the caps when it just is completely undetectable. And I love those men's wigs because they're just so natural.
Yeah. Well, I feel like with Ryan Murphy shows, you know, the hair and the makeup and just the look, it's all really working in tandem. And especially on a period show like Ratchet, it certainly stands out. What were your collaborations and some of the discussions that you had with the makeup team on the show?
Aaron Kruger-McCash and I have been partners in crime for quite a while. And so there's also an ease there with our collaborative process. We're all in it together. Lou Eyrich, Aaron, and myself, we've done quite a few shows together. And so we know each other's style, we know each other's working vocabulary. And it's almost like a repertory theater company where we just come back again and again to do another show together. So there's just this ease about it. And Aaron and I would talk about lip colors and nail colors, because all of that stuff really interests me as far as like how it's going to affect the overall visual. But one thing that was really surprising to me was walking onto that set for the first time at the hospital for our camera test and seeing the level of detail and the level of polish and all of the intricacies in that set really informed my work and informed what the people who are going to work there are going to look like, what are the background going to look like. It really, that set gave me a lot of information about exactly where we were. All of it's theory until you actually see it, and walking in, you're blown away by how beautiful that set was.
Yeah, I've talked to a few of even the cast members on Ratchet, and they've said that like they weren't expecting it to be so big and sort of open and so detailed. So yeah, there you go. But you really have worked on so many different Ryan Murphy productions over the years. You've been nominated for Emmys for almost all of them at this point. Can you just describe the environment itself of a Ryan Murphy show and how that separates itself from other things that you've worked on?
I think Ryan is driven in his vision, and we know what he wants, and there's a vocabulary there that we are very aware of. And like I said, it's like a repertory theater company. Everyone comes back together and it just feels good. Like it feels safe and lovely, and you know what you're getting yourself into. And the level of work is just astronomical. Every department brings 100% all the time on every show. And I feel very fortunate that I keep getting asked back to the party again and again.
Yeah. Well, something else I was curious about, maybe this is very inside baseball, but with these Ryan Murphy shows, a number of them were on FX from the shows that you worked on. But then with this new deal with Netflix, I think it's a pretty noticeable step up in terms of just production value overall. Could you speak to any of just the main differences that you've noticed from your vantage point of, working on an FX production versus something for Netflix?
Honestly, I haven't noticed that much. I think I'm given the same resources and I'm given the same sort of trailers, and a lot of the upper management folks are the same within Ryan Murphy Television. So I haven't really noticed a huge difference between the two companies. Like going from The Assassination of Gianni Versace into The Boys in the Band, and Ratchet, it still feels very elevated and it feels very supported by the network and by everyone at Ryan Murphy Television itself. So personally, for me, it hasn't been that much of a change.
Interesting. Well, you're a three-time Emmy winner. You won 3 years in a row for Feud, Betty and Joan, as well as the 2 seasons of American Crime Story. Do you have one of those years for you that stands out to you more than others, that just meant something a little extra to you personally?
I think it was the win for Feud. Feud was extraordinarily difficult show as far as the workload and as far as the research, and knowing I had to get everything so right. And I loved it. I loved every minute shooting of it. I was exhausted. I love that cast. Like, I just had such a phenomenal time on that show, and to have it recognized by my peers was really extraordinary.
Yeah. The design is incredible, especially as someone who loves that era. So well done for you on that. But
Thank you.
With Ratchet, assuming you're continuing forward with future seasons, you're going to get to explore a few different eras leading up to the 70s, assuming we stop there. Is there an era that you're particularly drawn to as a hairstylist that you'd be excited to explore?
I have this pocket of time that I love to work in, which is late 50s, early 60s. And Feud was 1963 is where we started. And I've done a few shows. I did Pan Am a million years ago for ABC, which was 1963. And for some, I just love it. I love that period. Like, I feel like it's in my bones now. I'm excited for that show to reach that time period. I think that'll be a couple years off, but yeah, I love the early 60s.
What do you love? What specifically do you love about that era for you?
I think it's from 1963 in November, everything changed when Kennedy was assassinated. Yeah. And so there's this like societal shift that happens style-wise that I think is really fascinating. And then we go from this like very tailored, very specific silhouette, very dressed hair, and it just sort of unravels as we move into the late 60s. And I love that hair being a demonstration of what's happened socially to the country. I think is really interesting.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if maybe you can explore some of that when the show gets there. But for those of you watching, subscribe for more interviews and go to goldderby.com to make your Emmy predictions. Chris, congrats again on the nomination. And thanks so much for talking with me today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.